The air hung heavy with dust. The smell of old paper filled Grant's nostrils. He coughed. He wandered deeper into the antique shop. It was a treasure trove of forgotten things. He ran his fingers along a shelf of chipped teacups. He stopped. A glint of gold caught his eye. It was tucked behind a chipped vase. An ancient book, bound in leather, with a strange symbol embossed on the cover. Grant picked up the book. It felt cold to the touch. He opened it. The pages crackled. The text was in a language he didn't recognize, but the words seemed to writhe on the page, as if they were alive. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. He couldn't explain it. He felt drawn to the book, as if it held a strange power. Grant bought the book. He knew he shouldn't, but something compelled him. He took it home. He sat down in his favorite armchair. He opened the book again. He stared at the strange symbols. He traced them with his finger. They seemed to pulse with a faint energy. He whispered to himself, "What secrets do you hold?" The book called to him. Every night it whispered promises of power, of untold riches, of a world where his desires were his command. He resisted at first. He knew it was foolish, dangerous, but the allure was too strong. He started to research the strange symbols. He spent hours in libraries. He scoured the internet. He found nothing. One night he gave in. He took the book to his desk. He lit a candle. He stared at the strange symbols. He spoke the words aloud. They felt foreign on his tongue, but as he spoke, the symbols glowed. The room filled with an eerie silence. Then a voice, deep and resonant. It seemed to come from the book itself. "State your desire," the voice boomed. Grant hesitated. He was both terrified and exhilarated. This was it, the moment of truth. He closed his eyes. He thought of his deepest desire. He wished for wealth. He wanted to never worry about money again. He wanted to live a life of luxury. He opened his eyes. The room was silent. The symbols on the page were dim. He waited. Nothing happened. He laughed. It was foolish. He had let his imagination get the better of him. The next morning, Grant woke up to a phone call. It was his lawyer. He had inherited a fortune from a distant relative. He was stunned. Could it be? Was it really possible? He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but deep inside he knew the truth. The book had granted his wish. He quit his job. He bought a luxurious penthouse apartment. He traveled the world. He lived a life of extravagance. He was happy for a while, but the book still called to him. It whispered of more, of greater power. He tried to ignore it. He tried to convince himself he was content, but the whispers grew louder. He found himself drawn back to the book. He opened it again. He stared at the symbols. They seemed to beckon him. He knew it was dangerous. He knew he should throw the book away, but he couldn't resist. He had tasted power, and he craved more. He wished for fame. He wanted to be recognized, adored. He wanted to leave his mark on the world. The book glowed. The voice boomed. So be it. The next day his life changed. He wrote a novel. It became an overnight sensation. He was interviewed on every major news channel. His face was on the cover of every magazine. He was praised for his genius. His phone never stopped ringing. He had everything he ever wanted: wealth, fame, power. But it wasn't enough. He was still haunted by the book, by its promises of even greater things, and he was starting to notice something strange. He couldn't quite place it, but something felt off, like a piece of a puzzle was missing. He started to see a man everywhere he went, a gaunt figure dressed in rags with hollow eyes. The man never spoke. He just stared at Grant, a look of accusation in his eyes. Grant tried to ignore him, but the man was always there, in the corner of his eye, a constant, unsettling presence. Grant tried to rationalize the man's presence. He told himself it was stress, lack of sleep, but deep down he knew it was the book. It was doing this. He tried to stop using its power, but it was too late. He was trapped. The book had its hooks in him, and it wouldn't let go. One day he gathered his courage. He decided to confront the mysterious man. He found him in a park, sitting on a bench, staring into space. Grant approached him. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man didn't answer. He just stared at Grant. His eyes seemed to burn with an eerie light. Grant reached out to touch the man's shoulder. As soon as his fingers made contact, he recoiled in horror. The man's skin was icy cold, and his flesh felt as if it were rotting away. Grant stumbled back. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He turned and ran. He didn't stop running until he reached his apartment. He slammed the door shut. He leaned against it, gasping for breath. He could still feel the man's cold, decaying flesh on his fingers. He looked down at his hand. It was shaking uncontrollably. He finally understood. The book wasn't a gift. It was a curse. Each wish came with a price, and the price was paid by the mysterious man. He raced to his desk. He grabbed the book. He had to get rid of it. He had to break the curse. He ran to the fireplace. He threw the book into the flames. He watched as it caught fire. The flames turned an eerie green, and the voice boomed one last time. "You cannot escape your desires." The flames died down. The book was gone, but Grant knew it wasn't over. He could still feel the man's presence lurking in the shadows, watching him, waiting. The man was everywhere, in his dreams, in the reflections in mirrors, in the shadows cast by streetlights. He was a constant reminder of Grant's greed, of his folly. He tried to move on, to forget, but it was impossible. The man haunted every aspect of his life. Grant's fame faded, his fortune dwindled. He was left with nothing but regret. And the haunting presence of the man, he was a prisoner in his own gilded cage, trapped by his own desires. He realized that true happiness wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about peace of mind, something he had lost the moment he opened the cursed book. He thought back to the antique shop, to the moment he first saw the book. If only he had walked away. If only he had never opened it. He'd been so blinded by his desires, he hadn't stopped to consider the consequences. He looked at the man, or rather, what was left of him. He was little more than a skeleton now, his bones held together by decaying flesh. His eyes were hollow sockets. He was a gruesome reminder of the price of Grant's wishes. Grant closed his eyes. He wished for one thing. He wished for ignorance. He wished to forget the book, to forget the man, to forget the curse. He wished to go back to the life he had before, a simple life, a life without magic, a life where ignorance was bliss. He opened his eyes. The man was gone. The apartment was empty. He was alone. He didn't know if his wish had been granted. He didn't know if he would ever truly be free from the curse. But for now there was silence. And in the silence he found a sliver of peace, a peace born of regret, and the hard-won knowledge that some things are best left undisturbed.